I am Nina Beth Carden, the director of the Maryland Campaign for Environmental Human Rights, and I have the distinct honor of introducing the wonderful Staci Hartwell, who will talk about the first priority bill to be presented this evening, that is the Environmental Human Rights Amendment. Staci is a seasoned renewable energy consultant, having honed her expertise while working for the energy giant Tesla. She's a devoted community advocate, serving as the co-chair of the Environmental and Climate Justice Committee of the NAACP Maryland State Conference, and a board member of the Maryland League of Conservation Voters Education Fund. Staci is the kind of champion we all want on our side. We talked about champions before. Maggie McIntosh is certainly one of our great champions. Well, Staci is a champion as well, and we are delighted that she is on our side, the side of all of us. Staci, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rabbi Carden. Good evening. I'd like to begin with some important statistics from a recent poll conducted on the Maryland Environmental Human Rights Amendment. These independent professional poll results are based on feedback from a representative sample of Maryland voters. The poll yielded the following. Erin, will you bring up the slide, please? Thank you. As you can see, more than 75% of Maryland voters support this amendment. In full disclosure, 10% oppose it and 15% weren't sure. If the election were held today, the majority of Maryland voters would vote for protecting this right in the state constitution. Maryland's went on to share that if this issue were on the ballot, more than half, approximately 52% of our voters said it would make them more likely to come out and vote. This amendment is a unifier. It speaks to the majority of our voters. The clear takeaway here is the amendment is not red, it is not blue, it is clearly purple. As a footnote, I'd like to highlight the margin of sampling error on this poll is not greater than plus or minus 3%, and that puts it at 95% confidence level. In other words, these results are credible. You know, the amendment formally recognizes environmental rights as civil rights with defined protections, which enables communities impacted by environmental justice to seek support and intervention. If ever there was a cry for environmental support from our constituents, it would be for this amendment, as it aligns and it dovetails with the mission of the climate and environmental movement and the best interests of our residents. You know, unfortunately, race is still the #1 indicator of where toxic and polluting facilities are located. This is not an alternate fact. Pollution and other environmental hazards are concentrated in BIPOC communities of color, regardless of economic status. Maryland, unfortunately, as you've heard, is no exception. The state is supposed to protect, preserve, and enhance our natural resources, and therefore they are to be held responsible to ensure our well-being as stewards of these natural resources, not for the interest of corporations, shareholders, but to us, we the people. Over 100 constitutions around the globe have adopted a human right to a healthy environment. Several states in the US have adopted this as a human right. It's time, as you've heard earlier, it's time Maryland takes a lead on this amendment. It's time we step up, be accountable, and assume a leadership position once again. I'm not speaking to you in a vacuum. I'm a native Washingtonian. I went to 5th through 12th grades in Prince George's County. I now, as of 2018, live and work here in the county once again. While at Tesla, I had the privilege of speaking with countless Maryland homeowners, small businesses, community and church organizations on their views on renewable energy and state and local government approaches to considering their best interests in environmental decisions. It was through my outreach with Tesla that I was able to understand the full scope of environmental issues confronting communities of color, linguistically isolated communities, and low and moderate income communities, and the lack of power, pun intended, these communities felt they had around their ability to navigate being able to address large-scale, compounded environmental impacts. And the overwhelming response has been they feel lost, under, and misrepresented on the environment. We are not only talking about protecting the environment, but we are also talking about the impacts on other tangential consequences of a contaminated environment, for example, property values. As we all know, amongst the most valuable assets a family has is their home. The value of homes impacts legacy wealth, how a family builds wealth and how they can leverage that wealth as the foundation for long-term financial well-being and a healthy financial legacy for generations to follow. I don't know if many of you have been following or heard of the recent Channel 9 expose on communities in Brandywine, asking why their real estate values for their property is less than that of similar communities in Montgomery, Howard, and other predominantly white communities. You can Google it. But, ask yourself, could one of the contributing factors be because Brandywine, Prince George's County, along with Baltimore City, Curtis Bay, Lothian and Anne Arundel County, Hebron and Wicomico County, and the like, bear the brunt of the polluting services that make this state function? The state, as many other states have, they've used predominantly BIPOC communities as dumping grounds for all the polluting services needed to help run this state, and have given them absolutely no consideration for their sacrifices, for the sacrifices they've made to keep this state functioning. And to add insult to injury, they continue to pile on more devastating infrastructure in these overburdened communities. Brandywine has more fossil fuel capacity than 99.9% of the country, and it is 67% Black. And as if having the state's only sewage sludge incinerator, multiple landfills, sitting at the convergence of 3 major trucking routes, 2 of which have been dubbed diesel death zones, as well as not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 coal gas power plants within a 13-mile radius, wastewater dumping into the waterways, and sunny day flooding. As if all this isn't enough, they are now supporting maglev, the gas pipeline on the Eastern Shore, the National Harbor Livingston Road battery energy storage station. Are they really going to allow permitting for this to be constructed in communities where people live? Those battery facilities are notoriously unstable. Those people are being treated over at Rosecroft are being treated like, guinea pigs, lab rats. And all of this to save 2 cents on their monthly electric bill, really? These communities have the highest rates of deaths related to air quality in the country, the highest levels of ozone in the state, second in the nation. And yet these agencies persist in their devastation of these communities. How much is enough? We cannot continue to undermine these communities and still expect them to thrive. This legislation serves as an equalizer. It empowers organizations with the leverage they need to help make fair and equitable decisions concerning the environment. It is the tide that lifts all ships. Vice President Kamala Harris said we cannot achieve health justice, economic justice, racial justice, or educational justice without environmental justice. This amendment is the common thread that uplifts and helps remedy other civil rights issues. These issues are inexorably linked, and it's time we acknowledge and act upon them. Before I close out here, I'd like to give a shout out to the sponsors of this amendment, those visionaries working so hard to give us the tools we need to protect ourselves and the environment. Amendment sponsors, Delegate Juanica Fisher and Senator Will Smith. Earlier advocates for this, Eric Barron and Obie Patterson, and then Delegate Vaughn Stewart. Saying their names out loud is important. They are stellar examples of responsible leadership. They see the big picture and understand the foundation to the remedy to our environmental ills. They understand accountability as a tool of a civilized society. Quite frankly, we would like to think of all of our elected leaders as being catalysts to fostering a dignified human existence for Marylanders. In closing, please lend not only your vote to this important amendment, but also your voice. Our legislators won't be concerned about any issue unless the people who elect them speak up. Please let them know how you feel about this fundamental, essential amendment. We hope we can count on you for this amendment, and we have the voters who support this amendment. We have the environmental justice community unanimously supporting this amendment. We need our legislators to stand behind and support this amendment too. The time for the Environmental Human Rights Amendment is now. Thank you ever so much. And now I'd like to popcorn over to my learned colleague, a stalwart environmental advocate, and my friend, Laurie McGilvray. Laurie?